Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another television series review. This television series is a Western from the United States, English language, released in the year 2025, directed by Peter Berg, and this series is called American Primeval. So American Primeval is set during the Wild West era. We have the United States that is really torn apart by violence. It's a very harsh and unforgiving landscape, and we have three stories that take place. The first story is a woman and her son that's trying to find the son's father in order to get to safety, but she needs someone to take her there, so she's trying desperately for that. The other story takes place with the Mormon religion and the Mormons that are persecuted because of their beliefs, and that they believe people are trying to exterminate them, so they're going to do everything to preserve their way of living, and also the Native American Indian and the dilemmas that they faced. And so this all takes place in that very brutal sort of environment, and how each story unfolds is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on American Primeval. This series really went under my radar. When it comes to television series, I'm not really up to date with anticipation as far as releases are concerned. I'm more into movies. But when I saw that this was a Western, I needed to go and see it. Now I grew up with Westerns. Since I was about 5 years old, I would watch John Wayne movies with my father. My father is fanatical with John Wayne. He just absolutely loves every movie that he's in. So I grew up with a lot of John Wayne stuff, cowboys and Indians, shootouts, stuff that I absolutely loved as a kid. And then you have other movies like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 3:10 to Yuma, the original, and also the remake with Russell Crowe was okay, but it was the original that I really remember. Then you've got the more recent westerns such as Unforgiven, Tombstone, and very recently Old Henry that I thought was brilliant. And so a lot of people say that the western is dead, but I believe it's not. It's just not as prolific as it used to be, but there are really, really good westerns out there. And so having that passion for westerns coming into this series, I thought hopefully this is really going to impress me. And after watching this series, I will say that it does live up to the hype to some extent. This is a very, very well made production. I thought as though it really captured the Wild West in a very brutal and unforgiving way. This movie has a very, very dark heart, and it shows the toughness of living in this era. It's not sugarcoating anything. And so this is a series that does take place in the Western era, but it's also symbolizing how harsh that era was. And so I thought as though it's really matter of fact, and it does play down in a very downbeat way. And so if you're into something that's going to make you happy, then this is not the series for you. But if you want something that really captures that harsh and unforgiving lifestyle, then I definitely feel as though American Primeval does a very good job of it. You've got characters in this show that have a lot of hardships, and the hardships just keep getting more and more. The intensifying sort of nature of this series I thought was really through the roof, and it does create a lot of suspense because you don't know what's going to happen to them. And so I felt as though it is much of a darker sort of Western, but it does capture that sense of adventure. And that's what I love about Westerns, that sense of, epic adventure. It's not your standard sort of action film. It's definitely a very simplistic sort of story that each Western has, but it's just the way it's told. I just thought as though it has that sense of adventure that makes it really enjoyable. And American Primeval, although it's very down and dark and brutal, it still has that sense of adventure. It still feels as though you're going on an experience. You're going on an endurance test. And so you're braving the elements, you're braving the mother nature, you're braving the cruelties that human beings can do upon one another, especially in this era. And so I definitely feel as though Peter Berg really created that atmosphere and created that environment. And the environment, I thought, took me back to yesteryear, movies that I absolutely loved. But as I said, it has that really downbeat and brutal sort of aspect to it that makes it something that you haven't seen before. So if you are tired of the generic sort of Western, this show really does capture what you love about Westerns, but provides something a little bit different. So my favourite stories would have to be the Mormons. I thought as though they were by far the most interesting. The Native American Indian, the plight that they went through, I've seen that time and time again. But when it comes to the Mormons and the religion during this era, I just thought as though that was by far the most interesting aspect. I thought the best character of the whole show was more of a cameo, and that featured a leader of a unit of the American Army. Now, that guy was just so likeable, and I hadn't seen a character with that emotional depth in a very, very long time. I really connected to this guy. I really wanted to, I could actually genuinely sense that he was a really good guy, and there was a really emotional moment where he's commentating on something that he's writing in his journal. And that corresponds with the scene that I'm not going to give away, but I thought that had such emotional punch. And I thought his character was absolutely phenomenal, and really makes it worth watching just for his performance. And so I'm not going to give anything away, as I said, but if you see it, you will know exactly what I mean. The leader of this section of the American Army, I thought he was an absolutely fantastic character. And so the other characters aren't quite as good, but they still hold enough interest for you to get from the first episode to the last episode. This is only 6 episodes long. It's a mini-series, and so it never outstays its welcome. I thought as though the continuity was fast-paced, it was frenetic. It was more of an action sort of series than it is a drama, but it does throw in human elements in this that actually makes it relatable. And so you can't disconnect yourself into watching a genuine action film that is a caricature. I thought as though there was humanity that was thrown in there that makes it even more brutal and unforgiving. And so if it sounds like your kind of thing, I would highly recommend you check this series out. The violence is there. The violence is very, very brutal. Again, that is the matter-of-fact way of this era of, of history. And so it doesn't flinch away from showing you some really hard things. But everything in this movie that's brutal, it just symbolizes the brutality of the world that these people are in. And so I thought as though it had a strong purpose instead of just being there to shock the audience for the sake of it. And so I thought that was very good. So each episode runs really well off the other. It leaves the carrot dangling, and you want to know how the next episode is going to unfold, and you want to know how the next episode is, and so on and so on. And so it does have a lot of binge-worthy qualities about it. If I had issues with this series, is that there is one glaring issue, and that glaring issue is the story of the mother and the son trying to find the father. Now, I just thought as though that section of the story really held the rest of the continuity down to some extent. I thought I didn't really care what these characters, whether or not they found the father. I just wanted to see what was happening with the Mormons and the Native American Indians. And so every time I went to that story that I wasn't interested in, I was just looking at my watch waiting for the other stories to kick in again. And so I just thought as though there were 2 really good stories, but there was one story that really let it down. It's not terrible, but it's just nowhere near as good as the other stories. And so that was ultimately the biggest problem. And there's another problem of the fact that, as I said, that army captain was absolutely fantastic, but none of the other characters really lived up to that standard. And so I just thought to myself, okay, I am getting into the world, I can really buy into what's going on, but I don't really care as much for the other characters as I did for this one specific character. And so I just didn't have the emotional sort of consistency that the series needed to make it an absolute knockout. A lot of people are praising this series to no end. I can understand why, but for me, I just saw a little bit of inconsistency in the characters, and that one story that kind of lagged it down prevented it from being absolutely flawless. But pushing that aside, it's still a very good action/western that does have a bit of humanity thrown in, and it's a very tough watch, and I thought as though it caught this part of history very, very well, and it gives you a very bleak and unrelenting insight into how people lived back then. So if it sounds like the kind of thing, go out there and see it. I'm going to give American Primeval 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching movies, and I'll see you later.